Good evening and welcome to Bible study for Wednesday, the 15th of December of 2021. I'm the Reverend James Merriam, one of the ministers for the United Church of Newport, and so it is my privilege to extend to you the greeting that says, whoever you are and wherever you are in life's journey, you are welcome here, and it is good to be with you on this wonderful day. It is good to join you. We had a great time last weekend with the United Church Cookie Fair. Always such a festive sort of bonanza of sweet treats for the season. A great time. We're going to have another great event this coming Friday when the Vermont Symphony Orchestra and Counterpoint Choir come to town. Come and join us in the United Church. They have some specific COVID protocols to be prepared for that event, but it does promise to be a great event and really a wonderful. They've always been. They've been coming to the United Church for some years now, and it's always just an incredible way to kick off the festive season. As you can see and probably hear, I'm here in my living room. We have our Christmas tree up and decorated, and as you can see and maybe are familiar with, when you have an almost 1-year-old, it's necessary to put the tree up and out of the way. So there it is for everyone's enjoyment. But maybe Adelaide will come join us in a little bit, or she'll just make her presence known. In any case, welcome to Bible study for this week. Welcome to Bible study in the run-up to this Sunday, which is Love Sunday. Our worship for the fourth Sunday of Advent, this coming Sunday, will include quite a wonderful and wide variety of music, including bell choir and instrumental. I think we're up to quintet. So just going to be a wonderful time, some classic songs, some wonderful togetherness, and just celebrations of the season and in the run-up to Christmas. The following Sunday, of course, will be is the 26th of December, the Feast of St. Stephen, or Boxing Day. And, we're just going to have a nice, casual, fun Sunday with some Christmas songs and some hot cocoa. So that's going to be a great time as well. Welcome to the Christmas season. Welcome to the last few days, the last little stretch of our long walk, our walk to Bethlehem, our journey of Advent. And we're going to be reading from the Prophet Micah, some of the particular and specific prophecy that has inspired, was a great inspiration in Jesus' time, was a source for his influence and the wonder that he was to people in his time, and that has been read and celebrated year in and year out ever since then. We're going to be reading from the Prophet Micah, so we're at quite near the end of the Old Testament in most people's sort of Christian layout Bible. I am using Robert Alter's new translation of the Hebrew Bible, which is laid out in the traditional Jewish way, in the rabbinical way. And so I am in quite near the end, as you can see, just a little bit left, just a couple of the shorter prophets follow Micah. I am in the book of the prophets, which is the middle book of the three. So we're still pretty close to sort of the middle of the flow of the Hebrew Bible, the Jewish Bible arrangement style for the Old Testament. We're very much in the middle, we're very much in the narrative, we're very much in the story, because we're really pretty close to the middle chronologically, especially. Micah is put normally quite near the end of the minor prophets, because the way the minor prophets are sorted, what the major prophets are sorted this way too, is partially by chronology, but more than that, sort of by importance and significance. In the case of the major prophets, those two things actually correspond quite closely. Isaiah's preeminence. Jeremiah is actually the longest in Hebrew in terms of the number of words that are included in it. And then Ezekiel comes third, a little bit weirder, a little bit shorter, a little bit later, and from a time that was frankly, less inspiring and less significant in the development of the nation. In the minor prophets, it's more complicated. There have been different theories, and there's a wide variety of how much information we have about those prophets from other sources, but also how much information we have about these prophets just from what they tell us. Of course, some prophets give a lot of citations, talk about their era, talk about who's king and what's going on at great length. while some really downplay what's going on and really talk about their humility, really, really very, very much how much of an ordinary person and not worth paying too much attention to they are. Micah is kind of in the middle in that and gives a wide range of, starting off chapter 1, verse 1, talking about that Micah prophesied during the reigns of particular kings, which gives us a general range because we can correlate those with, hello, lovey, what's up? Ah. We can correlate those with both other references in Scripture, especially in Kings and Chronicles, which are books of history, but books of the history and tales and stories of the prophets, along with the kings who they served, and often, really maybe most of the time, with whom they had long-running disputes and arguments. Oh, hello. So we can correlate that. We can get an idea, a pretty good idea, especially because Micah prophesied during a significant time in the history of both the northern and southern kingdoms, because he is pretty early on in that chronology, and we're going to see how important that is for understanding what he's saying. And this really, really pretty delightful, but very often, and for understandable reasons, often read into the Christmas story. All right, let's get to our reading. So we're going to be reading starting at the beginning of chapter 5 of Micah. And there's actually kind of a curious thing that it seems there's a little bit of, depending on your version of Scripture, there might be a slight variation in what's included in which verse. So the Scripture reading is often, the lectionary text often does not begin at the very beginning, but still has the same sort of introduction. And this is, again, a reminder that the verses are a study tool. They're not original. They're not sacred. They're not really fixed or in particular. It's just sort of a convention of putting these chapter marks and verse marks so that it's easy to find different pieces in Scripture. Sometimes that's very helpful. Sometimes these divisions, we read too much into these divisions. We take too much significance of these divisions and try to gain or take understanding or sacred message from these divisions that's just not there. That's a matter of the interpretation of others who came later, reading often in different languages. So Micah chapter 5, we're going to start with verse 1 at the beginning, and we're going to go through to about verse 8, which is a little bit longer than the lectionary calls for, but this is sort of a side reading, a less important reading in the lectionary most often, especially this week, because the main gospel reading and what we're going to be reading on Sunday is Mary's Magnificat, which of course is a wonderful and sort of a longer Scripture reading. Chapter 5. And you, Bethlehem of Ephrath, the least of Judah's clans, from you shall one come forth for me to be ruler of Israel, whose origins are from ancient times, from days of yore. Therefore shall he give them over till the time the woman in labor bears her child, and the rest of his brothers shall come back with the Israelites. And he shall stand and shepherd them by the might of the Lord, by the pride of the name of the Lord his God, and they shall dwell secure. For then shall he be great to the ends of the earth, and thus shall be the peace. Assyria shall not enter our land, nor tread in our citadels, and we shall set up against him 7 shepherds and 8 princes of the people. And they shall smash the land of Assyria with the sword, and the land of Nimrod in its gateways. And they shall save us from Assyria, should he enter our land. And should he tread within our borders, and the remnants of Jacob shall be in the midst of many people, like the dew from the Lord, like gentle rain upon the grass. And he shall not place hope in man nor expectation in humankind, and the remnant of Jacob shall be in the midst of many peoples, like a lion among forest beasts, like a young lion among the flocks of sheep that passes through and tramples, and tears apart with none to save. Your hand shall loom over your foes, and all your enemies be cut off. and then it continues again in the more prophetic, in the style of the prophets of that day, especially in grand and often very violent, very violent terminology. So you can probably kind of hear, it's pretty early on. I read quite a bit more than is included in the lectionary. What's familiar, of course, is the prophesying that it is at Bethlehem that the revival of the kingdom will come. Bethlehem of Ephraim, the least of Judah's clans, from you shall one come forth for me to be ruler of Israel. This has been translated in a couple of different ways. In part, it seems because people can hardly believe that it would be translated this way, that it would have this particular meaning. That this particular clan within the tribe of Judah, one of the 12 tribes of Israel, and the tribe that became really kind of the only one that was continuing on after the first exile, which is what we're talking about, after the fall of the northern kingdom. And really, the northern versus southern kingdom division was a political division, was an ideological division, was a religious division, but was really within an ethnic division, that it was 10 tribes against 2. Of course, the sourcing and the information on the exact nature and the what happened to the 12 tribes of Israel is in and of itself a giant field of study, and not something we can remotely get into. But what we do know, and what almost all of Scripture is talking about, actually, is the tribe of Judah, from which comes, as is sometimes used, the symbol, the tree of Jesse, that the sons of Jesse, particularly David, who was called from among the sons of Jesse in this particular tribe, in this particular town, that they would be the rulers and shepherds over Israel from then and forevermore. That promise is made way back in the beginning in the book of Samuel. It is Samuel's task to hear and announce this fact, and then it is a renewal and a renewal and a renewal all the way down the line of the covenant between the house of David, between this family of Bethlehem, and really you sort of have this clan that's all sort of gathered around and live in this sort of vicinity of this one town. So they really are all sort of one extended family. This is true in a lot of towns, a lot of communities. Everyone's at least distantly related to just everyone else, and that ties a community together. Of course, it can make family feuds into bigger than family feuds, but that's not what we're talking about right now. And it is just to say that it would be from Bethlehem, and specifically from the house of David, that the revival, that the next step, the return, both in terms of sacred worship and in terms of political power, that it is from that house of David, and so from the clan and from its origins. So really you have two parts here. First, that the family of David, the dynasty of David will continue to rule, and that you sort of have a return. You can look back to the origins and to sort of the small town origins of this line and of this reign, and that it will be in small and humble places where the community can look going forward. The least of Judah's clans, the ruler of Israel, whose origins are from ancient times, from days of yore. It's funny that here we are even in one of the earliest written of the prophets, and it's already talking about, back in the good old days. Therefore shall he give them over till the time the woman in labor bears her child, and the rest of his brothers shall come back with the Israelites. This is, of course, cited as being a direct prophecy of Jesus, of his being born, of his mother traveling to get to Bethlehem, to the city of David, to be a part of things, and that in the meantime that there's a wait, and that there will be times of struggle and difficulty until that time comes. It's really hard to get that out of this verse in context, because this is once again almost certainly talking about King Hezekiah of Judah, who was only an infant when this was written, or had not yet been born, but it was understood that the current king at the time, Ahaz, had that his wife was pregnant and that the baby seemed to be healthy. So this is saying that we have a short run of difficulty ahead of us, because as Micah and anyone else around could see, things were not going well in the wider community at the time, or in the whole area. But better times are coming. This is, of course, also perhaps a little bit of reflective of the fact that Hezekiah was a great reformer and one of the most noble and worthy of the kings, and restored the levels of worship in the temple, and cast out all the other false gods. So really was a much admired and much celebrated one among the kings. And here it is, the prediction of all that Hezekiah will accomplish. Of course, the kingdom was put back on a level footing. Hezekiah was a member, though distantly, of the kingdom of the house of David. But then we say, and he shall stand as a shepherd then by the might of the Lord, by the pride of the name of the Lord his God, and they shall dwell secure, and then shall he be great to the ends of the earth, and thus shall be the peace. Assyria shall not enter our lands, nor tread in our citadels. This is not a metaphor. Assyria does not represent something else. Assyria does not represent Satan or Rome or the United States or anything else. Specifically, the problem at the time was that the kingdom of Assyria, and there's also a reference to Nimrod. Nimrod was a city and also a ruler in Assyria, actually earlier than this period, but was something that was a word that was celebrated by the Assyrians, and the power of Nimrod was the kind of thing that they would talk about. We find it hard to imagine Nimrod because it's become synonymous with sort of moron, but that's because of the Israelites, or of the ancient Judeans, making fun of the Assyrians, because, of course, they didn't conquer the kingdom of Judah. They conquered the kingdom of Israel, but they did not conquer the kingdom of Judah, and the political situation turned around and things improved significantly. There would be raiding and desolation in the kingdom later on, under King Hezekiah, when Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came through, and but we can already see that from what Micah is writing, or what's being written about what Micah prophesied, that things are changing, that God will set up against him, against the Assyrians that is, 7 shepherds and 8 princes of the people. This is a poetic usage, but which seems to be describing a real world sort of alliance that's being set up, because 8 princes of the people specifically refers to 8 worldly princes, that is, princes among the Gentiles, and that there's some kind of an alliance that's being formed that would be a countervailing balance against the power of the Assyrians. 7 shepherds is a little bit more metaphorical, but perhaps refers to some sort of arrangement of protective castles or fortresses, or of tribal leaders in the area, that a new alliance has come, and they shall save us from the Assyrians, should they come along, and should he trend within our borders. And the remnant of Jacob shall be in the midst of many peoples, like the dew from the Lord, like the gentle rain upon the grass. And then the rest of it is saying that not only is the kingdom of Judah, which is really only 1 or 2 of the 12 tribes, going to stand strong, but that the 10 tribes, the other tribes, the tribes that had formed the kingdom of Israel, are not gone. This is not the end of them. They will be strong and continue to worship God wherever they find themselves. To some extent, it's a recognition, which is really a new thing, and a prediction of diaspora, that this worship, that this Yahweh worship is new and incredible and wonderful and powerful, and does not fade away just when people leave a particular land or a particular place, and is not tied in with a particular political organization, though they were much more closely aligned at the time than they are now. So there is, of course, a lot there, a lot that can be seen sort of as a parallel to Jesus, but really more of what inspired people to read Jesus in a particular way, and to some extent to write about Jesus in a particular way, especially Matthew, who really cared about getting his Old Testament citations and all of his fulfillments of prophecies correct. The others are less tied in with that, though you can certainly see parallels in Mary's Magnificat, the Song of Mary,
which celebrates many of these same kind of prophecies, but was really especially a celebration and a recognition of Luke, who was not Jewish, trying to do his best to read the Song of Hannah, which actually goes back to the beginning of the book of Samuel and is the first step in celebration of liberation, in a way of the initial discovery of the house of David and the uplifting of the house of David. So it's really, there are connections everywhere, whether those connections, how much we can take about those connections and how much we can read into our own times. What we can get out of this, really be joyful, celebrate even in the worst of times, and know that the evil in the world will not win. What other than that, specific prophecy about what's going to happen in the next election, that's definitely not helpful. Are they talking about Jesus? In one way, yes. In one way, no. But that's kind of how Scripture is. There's a lot there. And it's helpful because it can be read so many different ways, because it can be read, it can be helpful, it can be used, it can be celebrated in so many different circumstances. And for that, we can really be very grateful. So, see you Sunday at 10 o'clock for a wonderful musical service and a celebration of love. God bless.